Welcome to Inside Whitehall with me, James Starkey.
I'm me, Jonathan Gullis.
Today, we thought we would have a deep dive, as they say in the political world, into borough councils. Now, I don't know if you're anything like me. I and Jonathan will testify to this. Constantly have to check within what is the borough council actually responsible for? What's the difference between a borough and a district council? What are the proposed changes that Labour are making? What does a unitary council mean? All of these kind of terminologies we hear around councils and the separation of what they're responsible for, what MPs are responsible for, which I think in the minds of many, including the public, are sometimes confused about who's responsible for what. And I know, Jonathan, you have probably got tired of me over the past few years, constantly asking you these questions on a regular basis. But now is the time to ask you because you are now in charge of a borough council. You are newly elected reform leader of Newcastle under Lyme Borough Council. And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting for me to ask you these, and then you can say, "Well, I've already told you, James, and it's now on video." And then I know that you've done quite a lot of interesting stuff already and made a splash. Some popular with some people, maybe less popular with others. So we could run through some of the political things, but just at the first instance. So if you could give me yet again and the listener or viewer a breakdown, what does everywhere have a borough council? What is a borough council, and how is it distinct from a district council? What are you responsible for?
The number one, no, not everywhere has a borough council. And the idea is that different counts, there are different tiers, that they call them, of councils across the country. So there's a thing called a parish or a town council. They're largely ceremonial. They will deal with things like major civic style events where you'll see people wearing the chains, the gold chains around their neck, and maybe have a red gown and a hat in some cases. They'll also deal with like your planters, so your planters in your town centres stay nice and fresh and renewed with the right plants for the right seasons. Then you've got what we call borough or districts. They are what I'm now in charge of. So they oversee normally your leisure facilities, so leisure centres, swimming pools. They oversee your parks and the play equipment. They'll deal with, they will be a large owner of land. In some cases, they'll have properties, they'll have lands. They also are the
What would
planning
they own?
authority.
What would they own?
So we've got a variety. We've got high street shops. We've got
Actual
old council
shops.
buildings. Yeah, actual shops on the high street, council buildings, industrial units, public open spaces, green feasts, green fields, playgrounds and play parks, community centres, you name it. We've got, I think, over 500 assets
Wow.
as a borough council. So I'm working my way through that now to understand the sort of where they're all at, what's their usage and stuff like that. And then we'll also oversee, and I think probably what borough councils do largely is also littering, fly tipping, your street scene, so tidying up your streets. But the biggest thing of all is planning. We are the planning authority, so we're the ones that where planning applications come in. We're the ones that either officers approve it if it's at a certain level, like an extension on your house, or it goes to a planning committee if it's like 50, 100 houses, and a planning committee then either approves or disapproves. And of course, controversially in recent years, Sam Coates did a really good piece on Sky where he highlighted how councillors on those planning committees are not meant to make political decisions, but there are lots of obscure reasons, I think it's fair to say, why planning applications aren't approved, and therefore millions of pounds of taxpayers' money has gone on legal appeals, which ultimately the council always knew they were going to lose. But let's just be honest, politicians are politicians, and if they think they can win them a vote, they certainly vote again. So that's the biggest thing I think one of the biggest things that we do in terms of real growth economic style decisions. We have like far smaller pool of money than what is the next tier, which is a county council. The
So,
county
but
council,
give us an idea of your budget versus what a county council budgets might be.
county council budgets are hundreds of millions of pounds, if not near a billion. I'm on the tens of millions of
Okay.
pounds, so very sizable difference. We are the ones who collect business rates. We collect the council tax for everyone, and then we dish out to the police crime commissioner, the county council, the town council, and the government. We distribute their money, their portions of money to each of them. So when you get your council tax bill in my neck of the woods, you see how much you're paying out of it towards the town council, how much you're paying to the borough council, how much you pay to the county council, and how much you pay to the police and crime commissioner. And the idea is then that funds
And
all their
how
priorities.
much of that is decided for you? So let's take the police and crime commissioner. Is it a legal requirement that you give a certain amount, or like how much discretion do you have over all this money? Because
So,
my guess is it's a bit like government. There's a certain amount of money, which okay, you can make funding decisions, but it just kind of has to go to big amounts. So
so
you actually don't have a bit left.
it's all on precepts. So they obviously the police crime commission, every of those one of those authorities has the ability to raise or lower their council tax slash precepts. It's up to them. The town councils are not governed by the same rules as a county or a borough or district. A town council can raise, they could put up their precept by 300% if they wanted to, like that, and
Wow,
not need to go to the public. In fact, in Kidsgrove, it went up one year by 84%,
wow.
and they did not need to go to have a referendum. As in, for a district, a borough, or a county, that would require anything above 5%, 4.99, anything above that requires a referendum from the public to give consent. And then a police crime commissioner, I think it's something like 2 to 3%. They can go up or down. They can move it kind of. They can keep raising it or lower it slightly depending on what they want to do. But I think there's a cap on how much they can jack it up by. And so the idea is that they do that. And then the county council, they deal with your highways, your potholes. They
Ah,
deal with building new roads. They deal with your bus network or tram network. They'll deal with your social care for children in care and adults in care. And so they've got the most serious stuff. They're the ones facing the largest funding pressures because of those services. And about 60 to 70% of all their budgets go on just social care, just social
and
care.
that's
That does not
statutory,
include roads.
as in they
That's
have to
statutory.
spend that money.
They
They
have to
can't
deliver
change
those
that.
services. They can't change that. They have to, by law, deliver those services. And of course, they're facing huge debts and huge pressures. Then on top of that, there is this thing called a unitary council, which Stoke-on-Trent next door is. And that is one council that does all the job of all the other three in one. So Stoke does uh, waste and recycling, planning, social care, leisure centres, highways. They do everything in one council. And basically, what the government is looking to do under this Labour government is create that model across the country in these larger councils. So have unitary councils that everyone knows they have one council that they go to with all their moans and groans, and that have them on larger scale populations. The city of Stoke is only 240,000. The problem with these unitary councils is these small cities do not generate enough income via council tax. And so
Okay.
they are having to be bailed out more than your much larger county areas that obviously have a much larger population
So in
size.
short, maybe this is slightly a political question, but in short, then is that that's a distribution thing? Is that if I have a larger area, I've got some wealthier areas that I'm going to collect more tax from, that I can move to the less well-off areas? Is that why the bigger councils work better, or is there something else going on?
I think one is just population size. So if you've got 500,000 people, which is what the government's asked roughly for these new authorities to be based on, 500,000 people saying paying income council tax into one authority, you've got much bigger than the 240,000 that's currently paying in Stoke. You're doubling literally the size of the
Mm.
budget essentially. We're 121,000 people, so imagine like that's almost 4 times our budget we're talking about here.
Yeah.
In terms of what they bring in. Obviously, yes, look, in larger areas, you'll encompass geographically larger populations. So there will be housing in parts of a new authority that is on the higher council tax band, which will therefore help supplement the little in money you bring in from those council tax A, B, C bands. And the problem for Stoke-on-Trent, for example, is 94% of their properties are band A to D. Those are your four lowest bands. Whereas in, somewhere like Newcastle and Lyme, where I now represent, we will have a much larger stock, not majority, but at least I can't give a percentage without just making it up out in there, but we'll have a much larger stock of those band E upwards, which obviously pay far more council tax, and obviously
Right.
that helps our base. So that means those councils will have more money to, yes, then probably redistribute and help other areas or to invest in frontline services
And I guess you'd argue
to
that you
improve the
could
offer.
you could bring in efficiencies as well if you're doing the same service across a larger group of people.
100%. Oh yeah, so the idea is you could procure, you know, we have a chief exec, we have service directors. Stoke has the same. Stafford Moorlands, and the premise I'm basing this on is that the rumor is we might become a North Staffordshire authority. That's your hometown of Leek and stuff around there. We're talking about, rather than having three chief execs and three levels of three different directors, senior directors. You have one chief exec, one deputy chief exec, one director. And yes, when you're procuring, you're going to have more bargaining power. So when you're looking to who fixes our roads, well, we're an authority with this much money. So maybe you do it in-house. Maybe you choose that you can run it in-house, or you'll go externally and use a private provider. So the idea is it'll help much more with strategic planning. I will say this, and it's controversial, LGR, as we call it, local government organisation. There is a lot of common sense behind the theory of it. The issue I've witnessed is the delivery of this process. From where it started to where it is, the rules, shock horror, James, in government are constantly chopping and changing. And I think it's getting to a bit of a point where it's becoming a bit of a farce.
Well, so if you hang on that thought, I'd love it if you could go into the Labour proposed changes in a second. But just sticking on a council, you've mentioned the chief exec and how it runs. So then in your borough council, and I think it's similar structure if you're talking about a borough or county council, how they run, even if the budgets and the responsibilities are slightly different. So I'm a member of the public and I vote for my local councillor, and so I choose if I have Conservative, Labour, Reform, Lib Dem, etc. And then that's done on a kind of first past the post basis as our national election system. And so you elect a council which will have a majority or so on. So if you could give us an idea where the responsibilities lie between a leader of that council in a political terms, the chief exec, who appoints the chief exec, just kind of, if you could give us an idea how a council actually runs and who is responsible for what. I'm curious at that.
So the first thing I'll tell you is, unlike when you become a MP and, if we have a general election and let's pretend Andy Burnham just happens to be the leader of the Labour Party.
Who knows? Maybe he will be.
Who knows? Maybe he will be. And there's a general election. Either he or Nigel Farage, based on current polling, one of them becomes the Prime Minister. They immediately get to walk into 10 Downing Street. They immediately appoint a cabinet within the next 24 hours, and those cabinet ministers immediately enter department. That does not happen in a council.
Oh.
Yeah, I was elected on the 7th, or technically the early hours of the Friday the 8th of May. I was elected as my group leader. We had an internal meeting of the Reform UK group about a week and a half later. And it wasn't until the first council meeting on the 20th of May. That's normal. Well, it's all based on timings of when these meetings are planned, but
it never happens before.
No. They have to wait till everyone's been elected.
Okay.
Then every year there's an annual council. Every year there's a special annual meeting of the council. Now ours was scheduled for the 20th of May. It wasn't until the 20th of May until I was formally elected the leader. So therefore, despite being the largest group, despite being the group leader, despite having access to officers to start talking about my ideas, they could not act or engage with me as a leader until the night of the 20th when I was formally elected. So if you think about it, that's 13, 14 days until actually I officially had the ability to come into this building and say, right, we're now off to the races and get going. Now, in terms of responsibility, so hiring senior directors and the chief exec is the responsibility of the council. They normally have an employment committee, and what will happen is it'll be a cross-party committee, different weighting depending on how many councillors of each. We've obviously in Reform UK we would have the largest amount of councillors on that committee with the largest group, and the idea is that people will be shortlisted. The committee will then interview them, and the committee will come to a decision and decide who to hire. On the chief exec front, the chief exec might send in a report for directors and say, look, I've interviewed these people already. You interview them. Just so you know, these will probably be my preferred top two choices. And then we get to decide whether we agree with our chief exec or whether we would like to go in a different direction. Anything below that is the discretion of the chief executive and the senior directors. They may well come to me occasionally and say, we're hiring a manager. Just so you know, this is the person we've chosen. And they might do the kind thing of informing me, but they do not need my permission to hire that person. They are entitled to go ahead and hire.
How common is it that council leaders, the political council leader like yourself, how common is it at county or borough level that they would get rid of a chief exec? Or and I don't just, so I guess you've got a couple of times you might remove a chief executive. If you don't think they're doing a good enough job, or you just come in and you want your own person. So the equivalent to me would be something like a permanent secretary, or cabinet secretary is the most senior civil servant in government. That is I mean, it
Although
has
they change
happened.
more often, they change more often
Well,
than we used to see.
I was going to say it doesn't historically doesn't happen super often. It has. I think Keir Starmer's on his is he third? I think he's on his third.
But
So Mr. Stability's on his third, but it certainly it's not very common. A cabinet minister comes in and removes
yeah, yeah.
their permanent secretary. So
And that's the same
is
for
it
a council,
similar?
by the way.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. It's very rare. Um, Normally, a council leader could come in, for example, and say, I'm implementing an immediate freezing hire, and that has to be obeyed. Like, that's a decision a leader can make. We're not allowed to hire anyone at any level. Obviously, you'll get officers coming and talk to you. Now, I've not done that here, but we do have some vacancies, and there are savings in some of that. But I've chosen not to do that just yet. I want to sort of get to know the officers I'm working with, and because of local government organisation, to be honest with you, there's a lot of council officers looking, going, well, there's three chief execs, only one of us is going to get a job. So they're all shock horror looking for work. So it's actually quite weird because I walked in and the monitoring officer, who's a literal lawyer, who's the chief legal officer basically for the council, he had already gone and got himself a job at a future council that's going to exist.
Right.
So we've had to find someone temporary whilst we decide, well, do we do a shared deal with Stoke and share their person, which ultimately will probably be the person who ends up in the role anyway. And that way it does save me a bit of money. Also starts to build some of those foundations, but at the same time, a shared person means you don't get them full time. And obviously, a legal officer is pretty important for getting legal guidance and everything that goes through the council. So those are decisions that we have to make there. So no, it's very rare. Some councils might come in and do a management. They might do a staff restructure, and that's pretty much the only way a leader probably or a cabinet can really kind of stamp their authority on, like, going, right, there's too many directors, we're going to amalgamate these roles. Now it's like, they have to re-interview for their jobs. But obviously, as a new administration, I think, and that's something that you really have to think about. Do you want to do that? Because obviously, as you know, James, you might have all these other priorities, but if you want to restructure your staffing, guess what? That's going to be what the officers spend all their time focusing on, because obviously they're fighting for their jobs. So again, because of it slows everything down. So I think it's again a case of, it might be in some councils there's an extraordinary amount of management and senior leadership, and you go, this is just way too much. And right here, there's probably 200-300 grand I can save overnight. And in that case, I think I'd be up for doing that. But because of LGR, where we might become a shadow authority in 12 months' time, and again, there's complications in what that means. But that means a lot of my staff are voluntarily thinking about their futures anyway. And so in my case, I've just gone, well, I've only got maybe 12 months to do stuff, so let's just crack on with who we've got here and actually get stuff done that we can show people.
And so you touched on it before. So Labour have proposed this local government reorganisation plan. So step one, I'd like you to imagine that you are Labour's community secretary, and you're on the morning round, and you're explaining to the public in simple but positive terms. And then I think we'll go back to you for the reform view, let's say. But in the first instance, what's the kind of, it doesn't need to be over political, but what's the kind of pro case that Labour are putting forward and saying, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it?
Number one, none of you really know or understand, and frankly, why would you, about all these different councils and all the different things they do. And most of you get very frustrated at the constantly being told by people, oh, go and talk to them and go and talk to them. It's like the Spider-Man meme. We're all pointing at one another. So guess what? Number one, you're going to have a one-stop shop, one council where everything's dealt with. So you know exactly who's responsible, who's accountable, where the money's going, and be able to hold those people to account. Number two, we believe it will, and this is what they said, we believe it will save £500 million. Now, we've done some rejigging. We think it'll only cost £500 million now, but it's still going to be better than us having lots of different layers of government, which are coming with different responsibilities and different service pressures. And by having one council, they'll be better at being able to procure services and have better thinking. Because already the buses run from Stoke to Newcastle, so why not have one council agreeing on the bus network rather than having two negotiating?
In management speak, we're very much in streamline and synergies territory.
Streamlining and synergy. We're going to streamline and synergy because it's all going to be beautiful. It's all going to be big and beautiful by the time we finish. And obviously, look, and reality is that we will be able to devolve more powers. Everyone keeps telling us they want local people to have more power. Well, unless we have these larger authorities with more powers and more financial firepower, it's hard for us to be able to justify devolving more power. So this is about putting more power in local communities' hands.
Right. So that's the pro case. So
That's the
now
focus.
now now give me the attack on that. What's the reason and specifically, I guess, to make it more tricky for you. Why should we keep things the way? Why should we keep different tiers of councils more complicated? I'm an average voter wandering around Newcastle, and I've got to vote for these, and I'm not quite sure who's definitely in charge of the potholes versus the littering versus the planning. I'm angry about it. I don't know who to blame, but some of it's good, and I kind of like it. So why should we keep that system?
Well, James, first of all, Newcastle under Lyme is a royal borough. 850 years we've been a borough. In fact, we're so royal, we've got two staff that we got given by the king. One upon our creation of being a royal borough, and the other one because during the English Civil War, we remained loyal to His Majesty at the time.
Oh,
And we were rewarded with an additional staff because we're so loyal to
I
the
feel
king. Now,
like
all of that,
I feel we should stand up and salute or something at this point.
is going to be taken away when Stoke-on-Trent looms large over us and robs our identity of a royal borough. The potteries become suddenly Stoke's history. Suddenly becomes all-encompassing part of the potteries. We forget about our beautiful royal borough, and obviously Stoke-on-Trent comes with hundreds of million pounds of debt. We don't have hundreds of million pounds of debt, so why should my taxpayers in Newcastle and Lyme pay for the bad decision making and poor political choices of Labour and Conservative administrations for over 100 years? Why should we lumber the people of Newcastle and Borough with debt that's going to have to be repaid? And obviously local identity is important. The debt, and then guess what, James? We've got to go through step by step. We've got to write a new constitution. We've got to transfer data. We've got to deal with all the assets. Who gets what depot? Where the bin lorries run out of? What state are those depots in? Who's going to pay? Who pays for the depots to be upgraded if they need to be upgraded? What happens on? Where's this boundary line drawn? So how do we divvy up all these assets? And guess what that's going to do, James? Hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of hours of officer time. The only people getting rich off LGR are all the lawyers we're going to have to hire to go through everything, to understand how we transfer data, transfer assets, and all this other. So millions of pounds of taxpayers' money is about to be spent
Right.
to lawyers and legal fees rather than actually on people's priorities. So whilst it's noble in ambition, in the midst of a cost of living crisis, in the midst of economic turmoil, in the midst of potential global conflict, wouldn't those billions of pounds that the government claims it won't cost, but actually is going to cost, wouldn't it be better if we shoved that in the defence spending plan instead? Wouldn't it be better if we shoved that into fixing potholes? Wouldn't it be better if we spend that on fixing our high streets? Wouldn't that be a better use of taxpayers' money here and now in the midst of a cost of living crisis?
That makes sense. So in a nutshell, there's this kind of local identity argument, which I totally get, and is important and very important to some people. But there's a practical side, which is, look, if you're really going to do this, and it's not a terrible idea, this is just definitely not the time to do it. It's going to cost too much money. And what?
Do you know how much the government's giving councils, James?
No.
We got told today. I'll give you an exclusive here. We're told today we're going to get £900,000 to cover the cost of all the things we need to do. Our officers reckon that we've already spent £300,000 on that just to get to where we are now, but even before decisions be made.
Wow.
We reckon it's going to cost, I think we reckon £10 million plus to deal with it all in legal fees. So we're getting basically a tenth of the cost. So I've got to find millions of pounds.
That money will cut
in our budget.
From where?
It's going to have to come from council tax. It's going to have to come from frontline services potentially. It's going to have to come from existing budgets. It's going to have to find, oh God, worst case scenario, we have to borrow.
So you immediately start off with debt. So I guess you think the government's being disingenuous. What is there? Is there any organisation or someone who's come up or politically who said this is really what this whole thing's going to cost? Is there a kind of figure on that across the country? I mean,
I can't recall, and there probably will be, but I can't recall an organisation that's done that today. So sorry, listeners, I'll have to go away and ChatGPT would maybe save me on that one there. But the government initially said local government organisation would save £500 million. It's now said it will only cost £500 million. So the fact that we've already moved
£1 billion already has just gone.
£1 billion up already, and you know government, James. You understand this.
That means it's probably free.
That means it's probably we've seen what happened to HS2. Yeah. So I genuinely think we're talking best case scenario. I think it's £3 to £5 billion, but best case scenario. Now, we're watching government. The government could even cut welfare bill by £5 billion. £5 billion is now the difference between the government being able to have to government at the moment going to the IMF for a bailout or the bond market racking up the cost of borrowing. This is not child's play money now we're talking about here, and that's £5 billion that at a time when people are looking for help and support or at least something to change, and it's going to go on lawyers. It's going to go on
So,
council officers over time. It's going to go on lawyers. It's going to go on asset transfers, and that's even before you get to negotiating debt. Because by the way, the government said it would only cost £500 million, right? Surrey, I think it is. Surrey or Sussex, one of the two. I think it's Surrey, wherever Worthing is. They had £800 million in debt. To get that deal over the line, the government spent £400 million to pay half the debt. So you said it's going to cost £500 million. Well, you've just blown that on one council. There's now 21 councils going through this process, and lots of them are going to be councils with debt.
so you said so far, according to council officers, it's cost around £300,000 expected to go up. But so you said so far it's a small percentage of what the projected total cost is.
It
So
was
the
200 grand. 200 grand, James, was just to put our proposal together as a council back to the government to pay for all the consultation, all the expertise that we needed to bring in to put to the government what we thought LGR should look like as a council. So we had to spend 200 grand just to submit a proposal.
But the question I've got is it therefore too late? So you mentioned HS2. I think one of the problems with HS2 is, whatever you think about it, is it's kind of that sunk cost mentality that people get into, which is I spent this, it's easier to keep on spending. Is it the case that, let's say Andy Burnham does come in, or I mean, we talked the day after that the Defence Secretary, the Armed Forces Minister, and the PPS has gone from Defence. It seems impossible that Keir Starmer's there for too much longer. A new Prime Minister is going to very likely come in. If you were advising them neutrally, would you say, look, bin this off? Is it too late to do it?
I'll be honest,
there's
James.
too many problems with doing it.
I've written a letter already to Steve Reed as my leader, and said we're about to have a change of government. Let's be perfectly honest. That means announcements get delayed because new administration wants to review everything. New ministers come in and want to review everything. They also need to be brought up to speed. So at the moment, we're expecting to be told in July there should be an announcement. Now, there's an 18th of June is kind of lingering there. And in July, James, there might well be a new face walking to number 10. So for me, I've said to the officials, let's not pretend that July you're really going to announce this without it having, unless for some reason Keir Starmer's still there for now and he decides to keep pushing ahead with things to try and build that legacy
what's
for
the
himself.
announcement you're expecting in July, just to be clear?
What type of, whether we're going to be in East and West Staffordshire and North or South Staffordshire, or whether Newcastle and Lyme becomes its own unitary council.
So exactly the actual detail of what's
the actual announcement of what we become.
So just quickly, this is a load of councils, people like yourself have submitted plans, or their predecessors have said, this is what we think. So kind of consultation, I'm guessing. And they're now going to come back and reply to the consultation and say, right, this is what is happening. That's what we're expecting.
Yes, this is what we've chosen. So Staffordshire County Council suggested an East and West. Stoke City Council suggested a North and the South. We suggested, from the previous Conservative administration, I think a whole host of options, which seemed a little bit OTT for me. But in the end, the main one that was voted on was Newcastle become its own unitary like Stoke and have all the powers. It's a lovely idea in theory. I don't see financially how it will be able to survive. I just don't think there'll be enough of a council tax base to support social care alone, let alone everything else that we'd have to be responsible for. So whilst I understand why it was done politically, and let's be frank, it was a political move. I don't think it was based in real economic reality. I think it would be very difficult to make that council financially firm. So yeah, we're waiting to find out. By the way, the upper tier authorities, which is your unitaries and your counties, their views count more than our views. We're basically in the process to feel part of the process, but really they might as well be talking to Staffordshire County Council and Stoke City Council, because what we say to the government really means nothing.
Right. And so I'm Andy Burnham. I come in next month. The announcement hasn't been made. I look at this and say, I've got way bigger things to deal with. I've got the defence budget, welfare. I've got to go over to NATO visit, etc. Let's can this off. What's the downside? What's the problem that then causes the new Prime Minister of the government or the public? What's the downside if he cancels it?
The downside, I think it is still early enough that to cancel it. The worst is there'll be someone who does an FOI to figure out how much money was spent across all these councils to date so far. It will slightly. The other moan will be, well, some of these other authorities are already on the track. So if you're doing it for some, don't. This is when we create all these different tiers in politics that we've got. Some areas that have now gone ahead and done it, and others that haven't, and the mess that creates in terms of dealing with, when you write government policy, you have to constantly then think about, well, which authorities qualify for what funding and what level of funding based on their needs. So it does create work, but I think it's still early enough that you could get away with it being in the tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions pounds, rather than the billions of pounds bracket wasted. And my view would be that Andy Burnham, and this is what I have said to some people who know him, I've said that through other work I do in the Centre for Social Justice. I mean, he won't mind me saying, Matthew Torbett, someone who says he knows Andy. I've said to him, I would come in and just say, we're not going to do LGR. I've only got potentially 3 years as Prime Minister. This is already taken up 2 years and lots of time and energy. You know what I'd rather do? Let's just have mayors. I'll put mayors over geographical areas. I don't need council consent to do that. I can just crack on and say, Staffordshire and Shropshire, you're now having a mayor. You're having an election in 2028 for the mayor. In this meantime, we'll quickly agree what powers we're devolving. They're going to get skills, blah, blah. You council leaders, you form the board that monitors the mayor. You become his cabinet. He'll have to make you, as they have done in the Greater Liverpool Merseyside area. The Steve Rotherham's had to appoint a Reform council leader to a cabinet position in his mayoralty area. I'm sure he was delighted to do that. But then that's so simple. And then Andy Burnham the things he's always talked about, housing, skills. You can say straight away, this is my vision. I want Manchesterism to exist everywhere and empower local people to make local change. And I think that would come at a far lower cost, will be easily able to be delivered, and can still demonstrate change meaningfully in an area. And these councils can then go back to then going, right, and then say to those councils, now your job is to get back and focus on potholes and social care, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to hear any moaning from you now. And I think that would go down quite well, quite broadly. I think that would be popular in the local government world.
That's interesting. So we've done the structure, how it works, who's responsible for what. When we spoke about this before, I said to you, I think there's the kind of interesting about explaining in detail how it works. But you have done. I mean, you've been in for, I think, less than a month.
Yeah, less than a month. So about 3.5 weeks, basically, or 3 weeks. Yeah.
You have done 2 or 3 for a borough council, fairly sizable things. So, savings over £1 million. Taking some big. What did you tell us? What are these things you said you'd do before? And give us the political sell now, Gullis.
So look, James, I think I've seen enough in politics to realise if you don't come in with a plan, you're doomed to fail. And so I actually spent a lot of time.
Anyone in particular
there? I think the current Prime Minister certainly gave me some motivation to realise what I needed to do. So before the election, I was preparing things in terms of if I was elected leader of the group and therefore elected leader of the council, if we go on a majority, these are the things in the first, at least, 3 to 6 months I'd want to get cracking on with, and we need to make decisions on. So, yeah, some of the first one was shock horror. I'm a Reform council leader. There was 2019, there was a climate emergency declared. I'm revoking that, and I've cancelled Net Zero Newcastle 2030. And so what we've done, though, and what people keep missing, some I think by choice, some by fair enough, maybe we haven't explained as well as we could have, but we're reviewing all spending associated with that. Now, within that, for example, the previous administration had said that we'll put LED lighting instead of, in place. You know what, James? Good. That's common sense to me. We'll do it. They want to have better insulation in some buildings. Yep, happy with that. They want to put some solar panels to help with electricity costs. Absolutely not opposed to that whatsoever. These are what I'm calling facility upgrades. This is what I would call as common sense. If this is your home, how would you make it, work in a way that's sensible? But what we have said is...
But hang on, people might not associate reform with solar panels. They might think, well, hang on,
but
Gullis is going to be totally against this. They hate net zero. But you've okayed... Why did you okay solar panels?
Well, we're going through, but because obviously, number one, they can work, and they obviously do save money on electricity. I mean, Richard Tice literally has solar panels on, I think, on most of the sort of warehouses work that he does. Nigel Farage has openly said that he would personally have all new builds should come built with the solar panels on the roofs already. Now, obviously, there's 2 types. There's one to heat water. There's one that generates electricity. But for me, I just think that's common sense. So the technology exists and it's reliable. and it will deliver a saving,
So
then
that's going to
good. But
save the council money in the long term.
it will save us some money in the long term, I believe. But what we haven't agreed to, and has upset a certain portion of the voter base, my Facebook page has certainly got a few people with interesting hairstyles now suddenly commenting on there,
Well,
which is
let's
we
leave
can't.
hairstyles out of it. I mean, you
Let's
can't
leave
judge
hairstyles.
people on
Sorry.
that alone.
So what we've done is the previous Conservative administration said that when the waste lorry trucks needed replacing, they would replace them with electric rather than like diesel ones. And I've said no, we're not going to do that because for me, it's 70. We literally know this. It's £70,000 more per truck.
Wow.
We've saved £2.19 million by doing that, making that decision, and buying instead like for like in this Euro 6 standard, which is the highest standard in terms of the quality of truck, the type of diesel, which is obviously comes with much lower emissions than the old diesel trucks that were there before it. Secondly, we're a rural area. Now, from my understanding and my belief, Wiltshire trialled electric trucks and they said that it worked it didn't work when it was in a rural area, but it did work in a city environment. Well, we're not a city, we're a collection of towns and villages. And obviously that saving cost does not include the fact we would need to install an infrastructure of charging networks at the depot for 30 trucks. Now imagine the power that we're going to need, the grid upgrades we'll need, and obviously just the actual physical infrastructure to do that. And so my view is, I'm not going to waste money.
At all. They hadn't
No,
even included the cost for this.
That hadn't been included in that.
Wow.
So my view is, this net zero Newcastle 2030 was in that essence, that part was a gimmick. It was done to tick boxes and feel good and say that we're doing things. When actually, I think it's not going to deliver frontline services credibly and efficiently. So I've said, no, we're not going to go ahead. They want to put an air source heat pump in the leisure centre. Now, that contract is, I think, partially already underway. I'm reviewing because I have to look. Everything I've done has always been on, if I'm going to pull out of a contract, how much taxpayers' money am I willing to sacrifice? At the end of the day, that is not my money, it's their money. And obviously, if I end up having to pay penalty clauses, what am I willing to sacrifice in terms of investing in parks, for example, to do that? Now, I'm looking at that, for example. But again, my frustration's been I've been told that we need to replace the boilers, but I've found out that no one's actually checked if the boilers are actually in a state where they need replacing. Now, I've said to the council, we're going to spend some money to get an engineer to come tell me, do we need to do it? Because I've got this company coming to me saying, we've got this grant, but it's not a grant. It's my income tax that I gave to government that are giving it back to this company. And then it's my council tax filling up the shortfall. So it's not a grant, it's my taxes. Why am I going to install air source heat pumps into a leisure centre that fundamentally I don't even know if they'll actually work to the operational standard? And two, the only reason it's a cheaper option is because the government's using my money to subsidise it. When actually I might have a boiler that I might get an engineer going, oh, it's got 10 years in that, mate. And if it's got 10 years in it, guess what? It's going for another 10 years as it currently is.
Yeah.
Why would I spend hundreds of thousands of pounds from council tax end on top of the millions of pounds in grants we're receiving? And I say grant in a loose sense. So basically, again, virtue signal. So for me...
Just to stop you, so to your knowledge, they decided to put these heat pumps in.
Yeah.
They'd never checked. They'd never been like, well, do we definitely need new boilers? They just signed this.
Hasn't happened.
Millions.
Hasn't happened. I've literally asked officers to find someone to go and check the boilers because they admitted to me the only reason they were saying they needed changing was because the company that built the boilers said after so many years it had an end of life. But no one's actually gone to check if that. It's like all companies; they always put a clause in there. It's protection for them, but no one's actually gone to check like we would do if we were our own home.
Mate,
how's the boiler doing?
If you went off what your plumber or whatever gas engineer told you, you'd be replacing your. I mean, mattresses, boilers. They tell you this stuff all the time. I think most people will say, well, I can, I know when it's gonna go. So you cancelled that, or that's in process.
Well, that's currently being reviewed because I want to see what the state of the boiler is, and then I have to then, if it's in good condition, I will cancel it. If it's not in good condition, if it does need replacing, then I have to think very seriously about the variety of options and the costs associated with that, and obviously the implications of partly already being in a contract with this other company that I'll have to weigh up the pros and the cons about.
So, and the other thing that I was interesting in the local government way is the LGA, the Local Government Association. So, if you give us like, I don't know, 60 second 2 minute max.
Yeah.
What for those people that don't know, which I imagine is most people, what is the Local Government Association and kind of why, what's the relationship between councillors and the LGA?
The Local Government Association was set up by Tony Blair in 97, 98. Classic. There's quite a few things set up in 97, 98. And what happened, the LGA basically brings together all councils of all different levels across the country to have basically a body that can speak and represent and lobby Westminster on its behalf and put forward the case for local government. Within the Local Government Association, within the LGA, every political party of a certain size ends up with its own group on the LGA. And then the group size is based on, or your power within that is based on how many councillors you have nationwide. So Labour has the most councillors in the country. They are the largest group. They run the LGA. Next is the Conservatives, or the Liberal Democrats, I think. Then it's the Conservative Reform are nearly there. If Reform continues to gain councillors as it has done in the last 2 years, they are projected to be the largest group and therefore will actually take over the LGA within 3 years, which is quite remarkable for a new political party.
Yes.
And the idea of these groups is that the groups every council leader and group leader is invited, and then group and council group leaders can then appoint others to also attend. And the idea is that we can share best practice. There can be peer mentoring, peer reviews where we support one another, or indeed we even go and inspect each other's councils and give feedback and advice because of our brilliant expertise. And council officers also engage in this as well, by the way. And the idea is that, but the main reason is to share best practice and have one organisation that can really represent local government, James, if you believe all that, which I chose not to, obviously.
So okay, tell us why. You know,
So
how controversial is it?
So in the local government world, it's controversial. I'm the second council ever out of all the councils in England to pull out of the LGA. So it's quite a big deal.
Oh, wow.
And I'm getting accused that there's a lack of transparency now. That's not true. Number one, we have scrutiny committees at the council who inspect the work of the executive, myself and the cabinet. Number two, everything we do has to be published. So all our meetings, agendas, as well as all our finances are all available online. Thirdly, FOIs. People can FOI us, and obviously we have to comply with those. Fourthly, we are compliant to MHCLG. We have to show what we're doing. If they think that something's not going right, they will send without asking us, they will just send an inspector to come and investigate if they think there's malpractice. And obviously that inspector then publishes a report on their findings. So for me, the LGA, as it says, is a peer review. Now, I can tell you now, we wouldn't trust a head teacher from one school going to visit their friend, and it is a cozy mates club of another school, and say, oh yeah, your school's outstanding, mate. I'm really impressed. Come check mine. Oh yeah, it's outstanding, buddy. That's why we have Ofsted, to take out personalities and relationships and have a independent body review and check over the quality. Number two, when you pay your subscription to the council, that's not where it ends. So I then, if I want to go on courses, have to then pay additional money to go on courses. Now, there's so many groups, James, that offer courses, but guess what? My own council and council officers provide training courses for free because it's in-house. But I can instead go and spend, as I've had an email recently from the LGA, they do still email me, which I'm still quite funny because I'm certainly enjoying banking them up. I could spend £400 to go on a 2-day leadership course at the LGA.
Who pays £400?
That'll be, guess who? The council would pay that fee. The council would then pay my rail fare. The council will pay my lunch and dinner. It would pay my hotel accommodation, but the council will be the ones who fund that if I chose to go on those courses.
Just to be clear for anyone listening, and myself actually, so when you say council, that's not, in your case, the Reform Group. That is literally
Newcastle Borough Council.
Any council taxpayer, anyone who pays council tax in Newcastle Borough, they are paying for all these courses, these train fares, because
rail fares, car parks, underground, lunch, dinner, hotels, you name it, James. It's all paid for by the Newcastle Underline taxpayer. For me to go on training courses, and to that lovely office based at the old transport office, St James's Square. I think it's St James's Square, nearby, right by Parliament, where it's even got its own rooftop terrace. So this lovely
like a private members club.
So there's lovely, I feel it acts that way, to be honest with you. This lovely London HQ office with staff that are definitely not from Newcastle under Lyme, probably don't even know where Newcastle under Lyme is. We have all these offices, so I'd love to know how much of them are working from home versus actually in the office. All these rooftop terraces and meeting rooms. They even have conferences. So guess what? The first thing I was told was, oh, congratulations on becoming leader. Now we have the LGA conference in Bournemouth coming up. I would have had to take my chief exec, deputy chief exec, maybe one other officer and myself. That would have been rail fares, hotels, food, you name it, plus plus the fare, plus the cost of the conference in terms of attending. So I've got subscription. I have to pay. I'm told, you have to pay
And the
annually.
council pays all this.
Yeah, this all comes from the taxpayers' pool. Yes, not the Reform Group, not the Reform Party. Is that it comes from the money that council taxpayers fund.
It seems it just seems crazy. The other thing is, and I
So
guess,
by the way, for those listening, the fee, we reckon it's 17 grand we've saved. Now, I'm probing that figure because it's about, they're saying 17 grand when you add in the conferences they did attend, the hotel costs. I don't think they included in that the individual councillors who then went to the LGA and their rail fares. Because I know some councillors in this building on my opposition benches now who are getting the open return to London ticket. Well, that's £200 to £300 a trip.
yeah,
They're plus the car park, plus the underground, plus lunch. So we're talking £200 to £300 a day for those. And by the way, James, I'm going to make it even worse for you. The council taxpayer pays a subscription via their council tax to the LGA. The government gives a grant to the LGA of about 20 to 30 million pounds. That's your income tax that's going to this organisation. Then it gets other money. This LGA, I think, is about at least 30 to 40 million pounds in council tax from either council tax or income tax or general taxation funneled into this organisation. And guess what happens if I go on a peer review, James? Because this bit I've saved for now. If I go and peer reviewed my Reform Council buddy over in Sunderland, and I went there for even a day, and I'm a member of the LGA, I get, as a peer mentor, I get £371 allowance, aka I get to be paid to go and peer review my own buddy.
that seems crazy.
The council officers also get paid. So not only am I paying to go on conferences, pay for my rail fare, pay for my travel, travel, accommodation, all that pay, I can actually earn a living. And if you're as the deputy group leader of the Conservative group, who's Councillor Abby Brown, who's based in Stoke-on-Trent City Council, I've checked this, so if she thinks I'm libelous, she's welcome to sue me. She gets, as a vice chair of a committee, £19,500 a year from the LGA. Now she's paid as a Stoke-on-Trent. She gets paid as a vice chair of a committee. A group leader on the LGA for each group is on roughly £40,000 to £45,000 per annum, on top of their leadership salary as a councillor and on top of their councillor salary and any responsibilities they have. So Abby Brown, at one stage, was the deputy group leader of the LGA. I don't believe that comes with a payment, but she got put onto as a committee as a chair. That comes with like 19 grand. She gets 12 grand as a Stoke-on-Trent City Council, and as a leader of the City Council, she was also getting an additional 30 to 40, I think, £1,000. Again, happy to be correct on those figures if she wants to challenge. But over 40 to 50 grand a year as a professional councillor. And if you're getting paid 19.5 grand to chair a committee, and you're only getting paid 12 grand to represent Stoke-on-Trent City, where's your loyalty lie is my question. Because my view is, well, the one who's giving me the most money is where my loyalty is going to lie. So therefore, I'm sorry to say, I believe it's totally disingenuous to think this is some talking shop. I've introduced a thing called an Article 4 direction, which is to control HMOs in my area. Guess how I found it out? I called Google. I Googled away best council examples of tackling HMOs. And lo and behold, a stream of ideas came up. And what did I do? I emailed those councils, or I contacted them. And I read what they had put on their own websites. And then I found a model. I brought it to the council. Said, this is what I've researched to my own officers. What do you think? Their officers, they went and looked into it. They contacted their colleagues at those councils as well. And we've been able to come up with an Article 4 direction without once having to go through the LGA. So I have looked for best practice, found best practice, and now implementing best practice in this issue without needing the LGA once.
That's fascinating. And on the lobbying thing, I find it incredible that you would set up an organisation that's made up of politicians in a lot of the time the same party. Some of those are going to be in the same party that's the governing party and the opposition parties to lobby for you. I mean, you're all it's made up of politicians. If there's one thing they surely know how to do, it's to lobby people. Why we need a 30 to 40 million pound organisation to do that for them does seem to raise some questions to me.
Like I say, and by the way, we've had legal advice back. The other council in the country is Bromley, that's not part of the LGA. They've been out for about a decade, and they've told us it's made no difference to their life whatsoever not being in it. In fact, they've said, ironically, any money that comes from central government and funneled to councils via the LGA, even if you're not a member of it, the LGA still have to send you it.
So you're not even losing out on that?
Not even losing out on central government funds by the LGA.
That's crazy. So just to end with, what you've made a couple of big changes in the first 4 weeks you've been in there. Where are you? What do you think you can do over the next year? I mean, as you said yourself, you may
Yeah.
become a shadow councillor the next year. What are your kind of plans for the year ahead, or are you
Oh, so
still
it's good.
kind of figuring things out?
So look, I'm very lucky that the previous administration had got town deal funding, future high streets funding, and came up with a great four different schemes in our town centre with Kaplan Centric, I've worked with in Stoke when I was an MP, to develop what to turn a car park into new housing and to turn a shopping centre into new housing. So some of the first of its kind in the country. So it's great, and these will be high quality homes for young professionals. We're a university town, but we don't retain enough of that talent. And the part of that is they don't have the type of accommodation that they're looking for. So
Mm.
I think that's going to be great, and obviously regenerate our town centre, more footfall for our town centre. And what's great about Kaplan Centric is that they are, and they did a lot of their work in Greater Manchester. In fact, Tim Heatley, the co-founder, was with me yesterday. He's personal friends with Andy Burnham. We're having a really interesting chat. And he's very strict about any shops they'll put below these flats. He's not allowing vape shops. He's not allowing barbers. He's not allowing bookies. He said, I'd rather than be empty and find the right type of independent chain or shop that comes in and offers a different offer on the high street than quickly fill them to fill my books. Which I think is a very,
That's very
it's a
admirable.
principle policy place. And his whole thing, they rent out those properties. So then they like to say they remain in the area, and they like to then see themselves as a stakeholder. And they then they do like events every year then with all their residents. And actually the idea is that if a resident is single, then they get married and they have a child, then they can say to their resident, well, we'll help you move to another one of our other properties within your area that's suitable for your family. So I think it's a really forward thinking. I know progressive.
You always
I'll
called
say the word
yourself
progressive.
then.
A regressive model, but it's impressive. So those projects are underway. I'm lucky. I've inherited that. I make no bones about that. So my job is to make sure that meets in 18 months, all four projects should be completed. So that's my challenge number one, making sure that happens. The second thing we're doing is I made no bones about it. I want to invest in parks. I want our parks to be places that kids can enjoy, particularly with the cost of living pressures, to have enough different type of play equipment and facilities that people can actually just go for free and enjoy the community. And so what I've done today is I've been given a list of all the money from developments assigned to specific parks or specific areas and I've said to officers, right, we've got nearly 1.5 million across, like literally sat there doing nothing at the moment. Said, well, 12 months, we need to have tenders organised, plans produced, work underway and completed within 12 months where there's already money assigned to it. Because obviously it's great and there's not needing to find new money. Then on the other hand, it's tackling antisocial behaviour, it's tackling vape shops, illegal vape shops and barber shops that are just criminal fronts. So that's doing work with the police, doing work with trading standards of the county council. And I'm currently asking for a review of what legal powers do we have as an authority. And I've said that I want to go to the maximum in the first offence, straight out the gate, go to the maximum. But what's the burden of evidence that we may need to in order to achieve that? Or what can we do without needing a burden of evidence? And Shock Horror James also said, what can we do that we might be legally challenged on? And I've said that I'm willing to get legally challenged on and have that row. So we're certainly looking at that. So it'll be your flight, and obviously then the lastly is fly tipping. And you saw this week Reform UK did a big announcement with Clean Up Britain about reform councils will maximise the fines that they give to fly tippers and litterers. And I've asked officers to instigate that work right now and then look at what we can do in terms of enforcement. So what I've done is I've called it bread and butter. Nicer parks with new modern play equipment and spruced up green spaces. It's tackling antisocial behaviour, tackling littering and fly tipping, and finishing or continuing the journey on regenerating our town centres. If I can do those things, I believe those will be visible changes that our community will see and ultimately will lead to, therefore, a more prosperous and happier place to live. And if I can do my part selfishly as a reform politician, I like to think then that means that we can show when reform is in charge of things, it can deliver and does govern and does make hard choices. So, for example, we've got to find more burial space. This is the type of conversation I'm having. We've got we need to find more burial space. There's a plot of land that the previous administration thought about selling half off for housing and then using the other half to add additional burial space. Then a few people moaned and groaned on Facebook and they chickened out of it as far as I'm concerned. I've said, and if they haven't put any covenants on that land, if that land has not had any special village green status or whatever that we've got to have to undo, I'm up for that fight with people. Because at the end of the day, we need to build houses. And so I want to be a YIMBY council. I want to be pro-development. I want the right type of development. I want it to be done with the community feel and thought. I want it to be in the right places. But I want to work with developers to do that, not be hostile to them automatically on the assumption they're all evil and bad. So in that case, I've said where a council owns an asset, And I said we've got over 500 of them. I'm asking for a review on every single one of them. Which ones? So we've got community centres, for example. Now they are a public good, but they come at a huge cost to us, and we have lots of many people running them who want to do more with them, but we're limited about what we can let them do because of the cost of doing that. I've said to officers today, every community centre that's got a community group in it, they'll be offered to buy that building for £1 because I think it's more important the asset that it means to the community than the value it has on the open market. But obviously, I'm only doing that on those community centres. If it's like I've got another parish council that wants to buy the land that we're going to build a park on with Section 106 money. I've said to the parish council, they've apparently been 4 years. I've said to the council officer today, and I emailed the parish council today, you can have it. You have to pay market value. If you want it, you can have it. I'm not going to hold on to something for the sake of holding on to it. If you want to own it, and with all the headaches that comes with owning a piece of land, and if you try, and we'll make it clear that you can only keep it for recreational, so you can't turn it into development because that obviously will uplift the cost of that land. As long as you agree to all those terms and conditions, you can buy it off us, no problem. Another parish council wants to buy a car park. I've told them, and there's this little country path that they keep moaning about gets muddy. I've said to them, I'm going to give you the car park for market value, and I'll give you that little strip of land for free. I'll chuck it in, buy one, get one free. Here we go. So I'm willing to do deals because at the end of the day, we're a council. Our funds are getting more and more limited. The cost of the legal services we have to deliver are getting more and more pressured. And so for me, I think we have to make difficult trade-offs, and I'm not afraid to make those difficult trade-offs. Because at the end of the day, I will say to the public, if I don't do that, for example, with the burial space, we simply won't be able to bury people in our local community. And if you want your family to be next to your loved ones, this is the only way we can make it happen. Same with the high street. I don't think the council should be sitting there with high street shops. If we can do something with them and make them pop-up stores where people can just move stuff in, I'd love to do that. But it's about having the capital to do that. And I'm sorry to say that, like every other local authority, we are very limited on resource and on finance. And so if there's another group that if there's someone who wants to come and do something with it, as long as they work with us, and we will put always protections in place. For example, these assets I want to sell for £1, I'm going to say that we have the right of first refusal to buy it back for £1 so that they do remain a community asset. But ultimately say to those people, if you want to interior decorate it differently, if you want to add an extension onto it, well then that's your choice, but you have to fund it. We can't do it anymore. There you go.
That's a very comprehensive overlook of how councils work, borough, district and town, and what you've been doing over the past month. So I really appreciate it, because I think I said to you, it's one that I kind of wanted to do for a while, but hearing about what's been going on, what you've been up to in Newcastle over the past month, I thought it was perfect time to do it. So thank you for that, Jonathan. And maybe we'll do an update on it in a year's time or something.
Have I succeeded or have I failed? We'll find out.
Yes. Well, we can, well, at some point you'll get a verdict on that, as always. But
yeah, the voters, like they say, they've sacked me once before. Let's see if they'll sack me again.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll make you a T-shirt if they do. Anyway, thanks for listening. As usual, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. So if that's Apple or Spotify, we're available on those, Substack, and of course our YouTube channel. And then do go to we've got a TikTok channel, believe it or not, which Jonathan actually apparently didn't know about until I told him last week. The clips have been going up on there for about 2 months. So any of those places you can get clips, or you can listen to us, and we'll see you again next week. Bye from me.
Bye from me.